Yeah, I mean, I think this has been a problem for a few years, and I'd say thankfully during this tournament other people are highlighting it, because I can't always be that person being the whistleblower, but I did bring it to people's attention a couple of years ago when there was not one player of colour picked for the squad, and then Ebony Salmon got called off standby. So I think the fact that sometimes people only see what they want to see, I don't think that Serena Vigan's picking players based upon colour. It's not her fault, but I think it's lower down. You know, it starts at grassroots. We're being blocked some way, somehow, and I think there needs to be more visibility. Now, people like myself, Alex Scott, Eniona Raluco, even being on TV, hopefully young girls can aspire to be that, because seeing is believing. Because if people can believe they can be something and see it, they're going to do it, aren't they? So I just think, yeah, it's certainly something that disappoints me, because obviously, you know, people say, well, what can you do if there's but there's they can't be right, because when I played, you know, it wasn't even something we thought about, because there were so many of us, whereas even in the WSL now, there's not many. And that's a problem for me. That's a big problem, because like I said, we're not asking players to be picked. I don't think anybody sits in a room and says, we're not picking that player because they're black or a person of colour. I don't think so. But what I will say is there's obviously a problem, and hopefully it'll be addressed after this tournament. It's not going to happen overnight, but it has to happen, because in the next hopefully 2 to 3 years, we'll start to see more people that look like me, look like you, that look like Alex Scott coming through, because we are there. You know, it's got nothing to do with the training grounds being in the rural areas. I don't believe that, because I used to get to Arsenal in the middle of Hertfordshire. You know, fortunately, my mum and dad were great and they could take me. But if I couldn't get there, someone else would take me, or we pick other people up. That's the reality. Because I've heard a lot of people say it's because of where the training grounds are in inner city. I'm not having that at all. But hopefully, on a positive note, things can start to change. The conversation has taken place. I didn't want it to take away from anything that the players are doing, because it's not the players' fault. But I think what we're seeing right now is almost a hangover from the Mark Sampson stuff, a hangover from how some of the players conducted themselves during those moments that are still on the team now. And I think that's what we're seeing a hangover with, because if you see players celebrating with a manager like Mark Sampson, who, you know, his career, England career, ended in the way it did, how can you expect people like myself or young people of colour to think, actually, I want to play for that team, when you see the way myself and Eniona Raluco were treated? So, you know, I think that plays a part in it as well. But hopefully these conversations, these uncomfortable conversations, have to take place, because it's not okay and it's not correct. And hopefully I'm optimistic for the future.
Yeah, me too. I think it's important, even for somebody like me in the media, right, that people, they see us.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so I think that's really important.
And based upon because we're good.
Yes.
Not based upon our colour. And this is the thing. A lot of people say, oh, you're a token gesture, you're this, you're that. And I'm like, well, you try to do commentary through the whole tournament. And it's one thing sitting in a pub with your friends talking about the game, and it's one thing actually being live on air, and every single thing I say is being held upon. I know that former male professional players, if they say a name wrong, if they do something wrong, they won't get penalised for it on social media. I will. But it makes me a better pundit. That's the way I look at it. You know, Ian Wright did an unbelievable story, and he's been a massive ally for the women's game, even before everybody jumped on board. He's brilliant, and, you know, and he's with us, and he has been with us the whole time. So I'm just optimistic about the future. I'm absolutely buzzing. You know, we're outside Wembley, and it's just fantastic, and it's still kind of buzzing in the air around here now.
We're almost done. Man United, I can't leave without talking to you.
Oh, you're going to put on a downer now, no?
Well, tell me, let's talk about Cristiano. Could maybe affect that in the future.
Potentially, and that's why probably a lot of people in America, I lived there for 12 years, like cottage sports as opposed to, you know, professional sports, because when the money gets involved, it's almost like you do lose that connection between the fans. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I mean, before the game yesterday, just to give an example, Beth Mead and all the girls went round to every corner individually and was clapping. They don't need to do that. You know, I think there's a real connection between the fans and the players that I think's been lost in the men's game, regardless of money, because, you know, the players were giving away their boots at the final whistle. Alex Greenwood went over. They're all giving their shirts. Alessia Russo and Ella Toon came over to the end to take pictures with a trophy with the fans. It wasn't friends and family, it was fans. So I think that connection between them is so important, but I hope that it doesn't like lose its, you know, purity. I really do, because it's important for the women's game, and hopefully people like myself will allow that to not be the case.
And also the WSL in the women's game.
Yeah, I think we're already seeing that, unfortunately. I think it's hard for teams to compete with the likes of Chelsea, Man City, Man United and Arsenal. I really do. I think we're seeing that. And there's still teams in the WSL that are professional when it comes to training every day, but their salaries are not. There's still players in the WSL too that are getting contracts for like £20,000 and having to commit completely to that sport. So hopefully there can be money within the women's game that allow people to solely focus on playing football, because I think that's been the biggest difference. You know, in 2009 when we got to the final, a lot of my teammates were teachers, working part-time. We weren't training every day, and it was difficult, or we were training at 10 o'clock at night, you know, with our clubs from 8 till 10. I used to train with Arsenal at the Emirates or at the JVC Centre at Highbury. So I think the fact that everybody can kind of, now solely focus on being a footballer, but I hope that filters down to the other teams, not even in the WSL2 only, but in the lower league, like Aston Villa, for example. How can they compete with the likes of Chelsea? They can't. Pernilla Harder went to Chelsea for 300,000. Teams like Leicester and Aston Villa just don't have that budget. But hopefully their team will invest behind the scenes and they can get better, because there's only so far you can go with the investment being limited.
Yeah, sure. And then just a quick one on diversity, obviously.
Yeah, it's massive. I think people have to understand Manchester United women are only 4 years in existence. It's absolutely incredible. Real Madrid just got a team, which I think it needs to happen. We ultimately, I don't think we need the men's team to succeed, but we need that branding, we need that name, and I think sometimes that's what's been missing in the women's game. In America, I played there for 12 years, and whenever we partner with the men's team, it would always get bigger attendances, and I'm not saying we need the men to piggyback off. I think we're beyond that now, but I think the naming helps, and the fact that these players play for Manchester United is absolutely brilliant. I'm a Man United fan, and I think they've done themselves so much justice and pride this tournament, and a lot of people, like I said, didn't know some of these players before the tournament started, and now they do. And Alessia Russo, I mean, that goal is one of the best goals I've ever seen, and a lot of the kids in the playground, young girls, young boys are saying they're doing the Russo, got Beth Mead on the back of their shirts. It's absolutely fantastic.
And just, you talked about your going and playing in those other leagues.
Yeah, I think stepping outside my comfort zone is something that helped me, but I think at times it was almost like I was forced to move because the team folded that I was playing for in America, or the league in America 6 months on, 6 months off, and I didn't want to play 6 months and not play football. So I'd often go, and that's why you see so many female players bouncing around teams. But I think back then, quite a lot of us went over. Eniola Raluco, Alex Scott, Karen Carney, Kelly Smith. There were so many of us that went to America. I think now everybody wants to play in England. We've seen Americans coming this way. Some of the best players in the world, Abby Dolkamper, Sam Mewis, Rose Lavelle, came over here. Carly Lloyd even came over here a couple of years ago. So I think it's quite interesting because Georgia Stanway, I think Bayern Munich are very lucky that they snapped her up before the tournament, similar to Lika Martins in the last tournament when Barcelona snapped her up, because there'll be a lot of teams come knocking for her. But I do think a lot of the players now will stay in the WSL. Obviously, Caroline Weir, who plays for Scotland, has gone to Real Madrid. And I think I would encourage players to move abroad. I really would, based upon lifestyle and based upon learning a lot about yourself. I obviously want them to stay in England, but I do think you can step outside your comfort zone and learn so much, and learning new cultures and environments and footballing styles, I think, can only help.